Before we talk about the Himalayan 2021 and the XT250 Yamaha, also a 2021, I thought I'd put a picture of the road bike I use the most in here. I've got a complete review of this bike with 40,000 views or something. So check it out if you want to know more about it. I've ridden road bikes for a lot of years. I've owned lots of them, but my situation changed and I live in Santa Fe where there are lots of dirt trails, gravel roads, and I needed to do a little bit of mild off-roading. And so I found myself looking at the Himalayan, which is a 411 single-cylinder adventure bike, and an XT250 Yamaha, which is a dual sport bike. The biggest difference I noticed right away was a 26-inch seat. Each of these is about 31. I got short legs, so that's a challenge, and I've got a video on that. I'll try to put a link up. There are so many videos out about each of these bikes, the Yamaha XT250 and the Royal Enfield Himalayan, that I thought maybe something I could contribute to the conversation that's not already been done to death is, in some ways these bikes are similar. They cost about the same. They're about the same power. They go about the same top speed, but they also have very different personalities. And since I have one of each, I thought it'd be fun to go a little close up and personal on the two different models. The best description I've heard of the difference between an adventure bike and a dual sport bike is a dual sport bike is a dirt bike with turn signals, and an adventure bike is a road bike that you can ride on a crappy road. I think I didn't come up with that, but it seems true. So what we've got here is a single cylinder 250, very lightweight. You could definitely put this bike on the hitch of an RV or a pickup truck. I think it's a shade under 300 pounds wet, and it's rocking about 19 horsepower. And the tires are very skinny. I've noticed that the trails I ride, or the sort of crummy roads I ride near my house, are very sandy, very fine New Mexico sand. And these have a sort of bicycle feel to them. It's not hard to kick up a rooster tail or to accidentally or on purpose break loose a little bit, but it's very easy to control. Obviously lots of travel. I'll get the specs, but the travel, as I recall, is almost the same between these two bikes on the suspension. Both bikes have really good disc brakes front and back. The Japanese Big Four manufacturers all have a great reputation for disc brakes. New generation Himalayan, which they've been making about 5 years, those disc brakes are made by some subsidiary of Brembo. What I find is they're just about right for the bike. It's not a fast bike, and you're not going to be zooming around on it. It's a 411 single, 25 horsepower, 440 pounds. So it's got just enough engine power to get you down the road. It's not a fast bike. The first time I got on it and gave it the juice, I thought the handbrake was on, like an emergency brake. Then I remembered motorcycles don't have those. So you're definitely not going to accidentally wheelie or anything like that. And what I find is the brakes are not overpowered, so that you're not going to nosedive coming up to a red light, but they'll stop you just fine. They've got a really good modulated feel to them. Both bikes have a great friction zone. They don't have a lot of excess power, and they're designed to go on some pretty unreliable surfaces, or surfaces that go from wet to dry to sandy to good grip. And if you're experienced at working the friction zone, and with the easy to modulate power that both of these bikes have, you're gonna have no problem dealing with funny surfaces. Comparison to 21-inch, this bike comes equipped with Pirellis. That could probably change without notice, but I've always had great experience with Pirelli tires on cars and bikes, and these are no different. I don't really ride in mud, and I've heard it said that this particular tire is not great in mud, but on this bike has pretty good road manners and great off-road manners, and I think the tires are a great compromise of both kinds of surfaces. One thing that's real different between this and the XT250 Yamaha is this stuff. The dashboard, I think the Royal Enfield is much more to my liking. It's got the two big analog clocks, a speedometer and a tach. And it's got a proper fuel gauge, which I've never had on any bike I've ever had. The compass is controversial. Some people call it useless. Some say it works fine. What I find is if you ride in a couple of figure eights at the beginning of the day, once the bike is running and warmed up, that seems to sort out whatever funny business goes on, and the compass works fine. Oh, I know why I wanted to show you this angle. The fixed cowl. I've never had like a Harley road bike or anything, but you'll notice this has a fixed cowl. It's got a pretty good windscreen. It's not a fly that's real tiny, and it's not a great big old-fashioned one. But you know, I'm not a big guy, and this seems to send all the buffeting right over my helmet, and it works well. But what I want to point out is when you turn the handlebars, the cowl stays straight. Never had that before, and it's been kind of hard for me to get used to. When you're in low-speed situations on a driveway or in a parking lot, there's something about the mixed message you get when you're turning and the cowl doesn't move, so you feel like you're going straight. It's been hard for me to get used to, but also it works great. And for some of y'all, if you grew up on Harleys, it's not an issue at all. The old Batwing fairings have been doing that forever. ABS, switchable ABS. You can turn the rears off if you want. A tachometer, and a gear counter that's going to come in handy if you try to pull away from a red light in second on this thing. It's not going to go well for you. Clock, thermometer, 2 resettable trip odometers, and a side stand indicator. This thing's got a great dashboard. A somewhat adjustable windscreen. I cover this in a lot of detail on my video about the hand grips that I installed. Yes, indeed. Those brakes are by Brembo. BYBRE, I don't know really how you're saying that, is their designs for small displacement, like under 600 cc. Proper dirt bike style rear brake pedal. And now that I'm down here, I see that the peg has the same option, so I'm going to figure out how to pull that rubber gadget out of the way, because I stand up on this thing a lot. A few things this bike has that the Yamaha doesn't. An oil cooler. Pretty hip, because you're going to be going slowly up crappy roads on this thing. Bash plate from the factory. 2 fenders. All right, no comments about it being dirty. I ride this thing. A factory batter tender port. Is that good or bad? Well, it's good because you'll always have a red hot battery. It's kind of bad because this thing needs a battery tender. According to the owner's manual, you have to hold that VI choke for a minute, then let it go for a minute, and let the bike warm up, and it's supposed to hit 1200 RPM. By the way, while I held it down for a minute, it died 3 times, and this is considered typical. By contrast, here's cold starting the Yamaha. That's the dashboard, not much to it. Here's the bottom line the way I see it. These are both good choices, and I think the sensible choice is the Yamaha. I think that because it's, if you're buying this to go off-road, it's the better of the two off-road. It's 140 pounds lighter. It's got 3 inches more of ground clearance. It's got an engine that will never let you down. And it's got little things like flexible lights and pegs that are designed to be bashed into and pop right back. It's got built-in grips that make this thing easy to maneuver between trees and so on, whether you're mounted on it or walking it. I just can't love the looks of it, and I spend more time on roads than I do off-road. And when I am off-road, I'm playing it pretty safe. And so this bike is heavier, lower. It's got a 5-inch longer wheelbase, so it's, I didn't really talk about this prior, it's got excellent road manners. When you dig into a long curve, this thing holds it like it's on rails. The geometry and the weight all really come together. This is more of a trials bike, a little twitchier. Maybe that's good, maybe it's bad, depends on your preference. This bike is never going to get you any attention, and maybe that's not important to you. I've driven Studebakers. I just sold my '68 Cadillac. I'm willing to put up with some foolishness for style's sake, and you will get into conversations at every red light and every parking lot on the Royal Enfield. It's not my first Royal. I had one of the classic 500s in army green, and it was very cool and very cheap and very flimsy. I finally couldn't live with the flimsiness of it. Royal Enfield, I went to Los Angeles for their launch of the 650 Twin series of bikes a while back, and they're incomparably better than the old Royals from the 90s and the early 2000s. So they have stepped their game up. They're still not as perfect as the big 4 Japanese bikes. And of those 4 brands, I put Yamaha at the top. And the surveys of most reliable bikes will bear me out. So, do you want to be sensible? And if you grew up watching Rad and you went from that world into motocross, then, and by the way, Rad stars my brother Bill Allen, then maybe this style is to your liking. I've got more of an old school Steve McQueen look at things, and so I still think the Royal Enfield is the one for me, but if I'm going to go on a rough trail with no help, probably going to borrow Colleen's Yamaha XT250.